An implicit bias is often revealed through actions or behaviors rather than words. And to say implicit bias is often based on stereotypes. Intersectionality consists of the complex cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, the way multiple identities are perceived, right? Whether it's sexism, racism, ageism, colorism, etc., how they all overlapped. The bystander effect. Very often we are in a legal environment and all of this stuff that I talked about, it's going around and we are witnessing it. And it's up to us whether we're going to be bystanders or upstanders.
Welcome and thank you for joining us for another Justia webinar. My name is Mina and I'll be the moderator for today. And now to kick things off, I want to go ahead and introduce our speaker, Amal K. Karikari. Amal K. Karikari Esquire is the founder of Miles Tales Publishing and Education Consulting and the author of The Talk, a Black Family's Conversation About Racism and Police Brutality, and other best-selling books. Her unique understanding of social issues, business, and the law has enabled her to become a relevant voice on issues as varied as race relations, women's issues, dating, parenting, self-love, hair bullying, and entrepreneurship. Her articles have been published in MSNBC's The Griot, The Huffington Post, The Atlantic, Madame Noir, and other publications. Ms. Karikari has also appeared on The Today Show, Al Jazeera's The Stream, The Nate Berkus Show, and Fox Business. The webinar presentation that you're about to watch will be approximately 1 hour, and time permitting, Amal will be taking audience questions at the end of the presentation today. So if you have questions that come up, please submit those by clicking into the Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen and sending them in there. Now, without further ado, here is Amal to discuss Practical Bystander Intervention in the Law Office 2025.
Thank you so much. So welcome, everyone. So happy to have you here today at this presentation, Practical Bystander Intervention in the Law Office 2025. And I have worked in a law office after graduating from University of Pennsylvania Law School. I worked for Cleary, Gottlieb, Steen, and Hamilton for a few years before then going on to in-house at Citigroup, Inc. So that's my background. Now I am the founder of my company, Miles Tales. I'm a diversity, equity, inclusion speaker. So that's our welcome. And let me tell you about the rest of the agenda. We're going to discuss the following: understanding bias and stereotypes, understanding microaggressions. Then we're going to have a discussion about how bias impacts equity in the legal profession. Now, this is the most important part. We are going to discuss how to become an upstander in the legal environment, not a bystander, but an upstander. We'll have our conclusion and then our Q&A. So get ready for an exciting, interesting conversation. But before we even begin, I would like to start with the intention. What is our goal here? What type of atmosphere are we seeking to create in this space? So we want a feeling of belonging, a feeling of community during a challenging time, a time in which viewpoint diversity and understanding each other's perspectives sometimes feels as if it is in short supply. We want to cultivate greater cultural understanding. We want to give you communication tools that enable confidence. So you're not there feeling restricted in your office, but you feel confident to speak. And even if you make a mistake, you feel as if you are in an atmosphere in which there is grace. And we also want to rehumanize each other. So let's take a moment of silence to reflect on those intentions. All right. So what is implicit bias? This is the less traditional and less understood form of bias that consists of the subtle and unconscious attitudes and beliefs that a person, organization, or institution holds towards an individual or group. Now, it is important to note that implicit bias is a subtle cognitive process that starts in the lizard brain, okay? This is our unrefined brain to a certain extent, the amygdala, the home of the fight, flight, freeze, fawn, right? So a person unconsciously engages in a rapid form of categorization: friend, foe, enemy, good, bad, often based on past experiences, family history, and very often the media. And as we discussed, there's an associated psychological response. There's often a physiological response too. Now, these implicit beliefs and underlying beliefs and stereotypes often do not coincide with the declared or conscious beliefs. This is very important. Very, very, very important. Because very often people have an impression of who they are and what their beliefs are. And they do not believe that they have implicit bias. However, they are still holding it to a certain extent to no fault of their own. It's because of the family history, the media, the past experiences. Okay, so I give this example. I'm curious as to what you think of this example, right? So this was during the pandemic. During the pandemic was so terrible. Okay, so let's get back. During the pandemic, I had not seen a friend in a while. And that friend was doing yoga videos to help people be calm and relaxed during the pandemic. She did a series of them, but I had been unable to join any of them. Then finally, I get an email that says it's her last Zoom yoga session because she is going on leave, maternity leave, or some sort of leave for a baby. So I write back to her, congratulations on your pregnancy. This is your opportunity to assist God with a miracle. I found some Maya Angelou quote about pregnancy being a time where, women and God are partnering for the miracle of birth. What did I assume? I assumed that by having a baby, she was physically having a baby, when in actuality, she was partnering with a surrogate. It's just an assumption, right? Based on past experiences, based on family history, based on all of these sort of things. And it was my immediate assumption or immediate response. I have some sort of bias when a woman is having a baby, a woman is physically having a baby. All right, let's talk about stereotypes. Widely held, but fixed and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of person or thing. Stereotypes are often perpetuated in the mass media to fulfill an economic, political, or social agenda. And implicit bias is often revealed through actions or behaviors rather than words. And to say implicit bias is often based on stereotypes, right? We just look at people, we have these reactions. I mean, one example that I give is this was a friend of mine who said that she looks like me, and she's from Honduras. She's a Black Latina, and she was speaking to someone from afar. A cashier couldn't tell they were speaking in Spanish, and the person was of Latin American origin and had tattoos. My friend told me that later on the cashier was asking her, "Are you safe? Are you okay?" Etc., etc., because she just presumed someone of Latin American origin with tattoos was a gangbanger, up to no good, what have you. And so this cashier was overly concerned that my friend was in danger when they were just having a pleasant conversation. Stereotypes. All right, so there's stereotypes about all sorts of people, and these stereotypes often have consequences in the legal environment. So people of Asian ancestry often stereotyped as being the perpetual foreigner, being brilliant in math but not having good social skills. Potentially people think of them as being wealthy and having poor motor skills. I remember one day I was at a party and I asked someone about Stuyvesant's football team. Stuyvesant is a very prestigious testing school in New York City. When I was growing up, there were 3 testing schools everyone wanted to get into: Stuyvesant, Brooklyn Tech, Bronx Science. Now there are more. And so I was at a party and I just said something about Stuyvesant's, do they have a good football team? Innocent question. And this woman next to me said, a bunch of Jews and Asians is not what would make a good football team. Can you imagine this person said this to me? This person, I do not remember, I do not know whether she was Jewish herself, she was white presenting. But these sort of stereotypes, right? So, in the legal environment, how does this play out? Assumed to be intellectually competent but socially challenged. Some may doubt their English language ability. There may be worries about immigration status, perpetual foreigner, even though many individuals of Asian ancestry are American citizens. There might be some social exclusion. And therefore, due to that social exclusion, there may be fewer opportunities for mentorship or sponsorship. People of Latin American descent or Hispanic descent very often have a similar idea of being a perpetual foreigner, being an illegal alien, not being American citizens. Unfortunately, there are also these very negative stereotypes about criminality and sexuality and intelligence, right? And so, how does this play out? Some may doubt English language ability. I have a friend of Latin American origin. She went to a prestigious boarding school with me. Then she goes to Amherst College, and she says the professors literally doubted that she wrote her papers because they felt that the papers did not mirror how she spoke or presented. So, I mean, this is real consequences, right? So, what happens in the legal environment? Again, worries about immigration status. Some may doubt language ability, sometimes mistaken for the help, social exclusion again with those lower opportunities or fewer opportunities for mentorship or sponsorship, sometimes negative performance reviews due to that predisposition or that bias, sometimes assumed to be the defendant and not the attorney. This has happened several times to people I know. Similar situations for people of African descent, terrible stereotypes about low intelligence, low socioeconomic background, potential criminality, and again, also a universal experience, right? People of African descent can be of so many different cultures, may have Southern roots and have multiple generations of roots in the United States, may be of immediate African descent from Nigeria, Kenya, Ghana, wherever, may be of Caribbean descent, and everything in between, right? And everything and all the different permutations of whether the person was born here, immigrated here, had two generations here, etc. So, but this idea that everyone's experience and everyone's culture is the same. So, how do we see this operating in the legal environment? Potentially negative performance reviews. And we're going to get into that, right? Sometimes mistaken for the help, right? So many, oh my goodness, this is a story about similar story to tell you. So this is a Black man who's tall, of immediate African descent, and he was waiting in a lobby of his firm. And he said that he's waiting there for a colleague, but he's tall and Black, and everyone started showing him their ID, assuming he was a security guard when this person was, a partner. These sort of experiences, right? And again, I'm going to stress the social exclusion because we are all aware that mentorship is so incredibly important in the legal environment. So, people of Native American ancestry, stereotypes about alcoholism, low intelligence, being spiritual, mystics. This very often affects performance reviews. Again, it can affect whether people are thinking they're the attorney or whether they're the defendant. Whether people are thinking that they're the attorney or whether they're the paralegal or whether they work in the mailroom. Similar. Women. Stereotypes based on gender. People assume they have better verbal skills and worse technical skills. Expected to be servile, subservient. Oh, if anyone has to pick up the coffee or anyone has to pick up things, let's put it on the woman. People expect them to be like the work mothers and engage in all of this caretaking at the job, assumed to be less rational. And then there's the expectation, which contributes to the gender wage gap, which is the expectation that they're financially supported by men either now or they should be very soon in the future. And this has a huge impact. Given assignments that are seen as less technical, expected always to be a good player and do menial tasks, as we mentioned, the gender wage gap, paid less money, may experience sexual advances and inappropriate innuendos. This happens very often when people assume when a woman is in a higher place, it's because she gave sexual favors to some benefactor, right? And then we have the social exclusion. I think that things have probably gotten better, but when I first, entered the workforce in investment banking, it was not uncommon for male colleagues to go to strip clubs together. And of course, the female colleagues were not going. And there were all of this, work related stuff actually being discussed that women were not a part of. For the LGBTQIA plus community, deemed to be promiscuous, association with HIV. And then, of course, the idea that no one is even expecting them to be around. Very often misgendered, discouraged from sharing information about romantic relationships, and then social exclusion. And finally, we have people with disabilities. Now, this is a very interesting category because it's the most fluid of all the categories, right? Disability can happen to anyone, and sometimes it's temporary, right? So this is a category that no one is immune from becoming potentially for a certain amount of time, right? So seen as pitiable, helpless, dependent, assumed to be unable to do things on their own, as a result, given less rigorous work, constantly asked if they need help, an assumption that a person's life is very, very different. And then there's the social exclusion, right? And then there's also the lack of accommodation. So there's someone who I very often work with on presentations who tells a terrible story about being a law student and doing interviews to get a job. And she went to an interview and could not get to the interview because the place did not have an elevator. So we also have the issue of inaccessibility. All right. So this one is also very interesting, which has to do with generations. And this is often coming up among clients, the generational quote unquote divide. So stereotype about the traditionalists and the baby boomers. These are stereotypes about people who are older, that they're less energetic, they're experiencing cognitive decline. Like everyone, for the most part, forgets things from time to time. But when it's an old person, the assumption is, oh my goodness, it's early onset or on-time onset, Alzheimer's or dementia, right? The idea that they're weak in technology skills, and that they're insensitive, right? They were pre-enlightenment, so to speak. And so they're not going to be sensitive to the needs of others. How does this impact the legal environment? Presumption of less competence, constantly maybe asked if they need help, maybe given fewer or less interesting projects, people, and encouraged to retire. People may think these people should be out the door already, right? Regardless of whether they've expressed any desire to retire, the assumption is they're on their way out. Okay, the millennials. Oh my goodness, this comes up. So I am on the cusp, but I kind of align myself more with Gen X, even though I'm on the cusp because, of the ideas about who the millennials are. So, what do people think of millennials? What are the stereotypes? Screen addicted, weak or low social skills, entitled, hypersensitive, and so sometimes presumption to be less competent, maybe given fewer or less interested projects, and may get challenges in getting promotions because of those stereotypes. And now we have veterans, okay? Assumed to be male, assumed to have PTSD sometimes, assumed to be less educated. And so women are assumed not to be veterans at work sometimes, and it may not be apprised of all the benefits they should be getting. They may get less strenuous assignments and limited responsibilities. So all of these stereotypes have real impacts on the legal environment. But one thing that I need to share is intersectionality. So I went through a lot of the different stereotypes, but this is the thing. People can have multiple identities at the same time. So a person who's Asian American is also going to fit into a generational group. And so they are not just being stereotyped because of their race or ethnicity, they may also be stereotyped due to their age. That's the intersection. Intersectionality consists of the complex cumulative way in which the effects of multiple forms of discrimination, the way multiple identities are perceived, right? Whether it's sexism, racism, ageism, colorism, etc., how they all overlapped in order to shape the experiences of different individuals. Okay, so now let's get more granular about how these things happen at work. So, important word, it's often thrown around, but very often thrown around without definitions. Microaggressions at work. What are microaggressions? Brief and commonplace or daily verbal, behavioral, and environmental indignities, whether intentional or unintentional, that communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative. And now you're just going to add any category there: racial, gender, sexual orientation, ability, religious slights, and insults to the target person. And they fall into three categories, according to the professor who coined the term, Daryl Wingsu: micro assaults, micro insults, and micro invalidations. Again, three types. Micro assault, which I remind people, it's like a gut punch. It's like, oh my goodness, it's like you just feel something terrible, that just this tinge of horror when you have these micro assaults. You have these micro insults, which are very often kind of like backhanded compliments, right? It's like someone saying something nice, but the underlying vibe of what they're saying is very insulting. And then you have the micro invalidations, when someone is not even seen. Someone's invalidated, and when it seems as if the person does not even exist. Okay, so micro assaults: conscious, deliberate, and or subtle or explicit bias attitudes, beliefs, or behaviors that are communicated through environmental cues, verbalizations, or behaviors, right? So a noose is a micro assault. And I know people are like, why is it not an assault? That seems kind of macro. The way the framework works, an assault is an actual assault. Someone putting a noose over someone's head is the assault. The micro assault is the noose hanging, which is the threat, not the actual assault. Does that kind of make sense? I hope. Swastikas. Oh my goodness. If someone sees a swastika, again, it's like you're being hit, because it's the threat of the violence, right? A cross burning, a racial epithet. And the example that I have at the bottom that I often give, which is from my personal experience, happened when I was taking my son. He's now like a big person in high school. But when I was registering him for my local public school district for first grade, when I went to go register him, the registrar lady at the school district had a Blue Lives Matter wristband on. Now, I put a question mark, reasonable minds may differ, but for me, it was like a punch. It was like a punch. I mean, this was around the time of the Eric Garner case in New York, where a Black man wound up being killed, choked by police officers when he was selling loosies or loose cigarettes in front of a corner store. And the Black Lives Matter movement's happening. People were saying, no, this is wrong. And of course, I want police to be alive. Can I say this again? I want police officers to be alive. I'm very grateful for the service of police officers. But I take issue, personal belief, right? I take issue with Blue Lives Matter because I didn't think any response was necessary to Black Lives Matter. I want police officers who are like, yes, indeed, Black Lives Matter. There's no need for there to be any counter argument, because we're all on the same page that human beings matter and that people's lives matter. So when I saw the registrar with this Blue Lives Matter wristband, it felt like a punch. People, I went and kept my sons in Quaker school. I registered them, and they did not, well, okay, I'll be honest with you, I forgot to even tell them that I wasn't coming back as I wrestled with it. But I thought that was a sign that I should keep them cocooned in their very liberal Quaker early childhood education center and not save my money and send them to public school. So anyway, if you want to discuss this with me, I'll share my contact information. But That was a micro assault to me. Okay, moving on. Micro insults. Oh my goodness. So as I said, these are kind of like the backhanded compliments. These are interpersonal or environmental communications that convey stereotypes, rudeness, and insensitivity. So in age, it would be, shouldn't you be retired by now? Right. And, asking if someone's retiring or thinking about retirement in general is not a terrible thing, but the tone, shouldn't you? Right. Like, you are so old, you should be, like, there's a underlying insult. Okay. Ableist language, like use of the term lame, the phrase, oh, you're only here because of affirmative action, right? Again, there's an insult. You're not meant to be here. Telling someone you're here does not look professional, right? So for women of African descent, very often there's a lot of pressure to either wear fake straight hair or to actually straighten the hair. And both can have very disastrous consequences. A long time ago, I realized either I'm going to wear kinky hair and my own hair, which I wear kinky, or I'm not going to have any hair, because all those chemical straighteners were like breaking off my hair. But very often, women of African descent are getting, your hair doesn't look professional, right? When we're wearing it in our natural state, short, cropped, locks, afros, what have you. You speak English so well. That's a backhanded compliment. But why wouldn't someone speak English so well? Like, if someone meets someone of Latin American ancestry and says, you speak English so well, but why shouldn't the person speak English so well? All right. Now, this one is a classic one. President Joe Biden, before he became president, said this about candidate Barack Obama. You mean you got the first mainstream African American who is articulate and bright and clean and a nice looking guy? I mean, that's storybook, man. Backhanded compliment. On the face, it's like, he said he was articulate, bright, clean, like all these wonderful, nice compliments, but the assumption is that that's odd. Saying that storybook is saying it's so unexpected to meet an African American or a man of African descent who has these qualities. So when this came out, Al Sharpton, who had run for president in the past, made the comment, hey, I take a shower every day, meaning he's clean. Why wasn't he considered all of these things? All right, next up, microaggressions. These are communications or environmental cues that exclude, negate, or nullify the thoughts and feelings and experiential reality of people of various categories. So, for example, when you go to a website of an organization, a law firm, and you're only seeing people of one race and you're not seeing all the diversity in terms of, gender, ethnicity, et cetera, right? There's an invalidation. It's like, those people aren't here. Or when someone says, when I look at you, I don't see color. So, common microaggressions in the legal environment. And we've discussed some of these. Boys of color complaining about being mistaken for clients of attorneys in the courtroom environment. So they're the attorney, but people think they are the defendant. Stereotypical gender roles, female associates sometimes unfairly expected to engage in more menial roles, more of these sort of mothering, work wife, quote unquote, type of roles. Of course, there's, the misgendering, right? This can have terrible repercussions due to the correlation between misgendering and suicide. And then we have exclusion. Diverse attorneys often report being excluded, not being invited to social events where critical networking occurs. So let's talk more granularly about these effects. So this is a phenomenal study. A leadership consulting firm, Nextian, engaged in a study at a law firm. All the partners received the same memorandum. 50% of the partners received a memorandum that stated the attorney was a third-year African-American associate named Thomas Mayer who attended NYU. 50% received a memorandum that stated the attorney was a third-year Caucasian associate named Thomas Mayer who attended NYU. It was the same memo. They specifically put different mistakes in. All they did was tell some people, this is a black guy. Tell other people, this is a white guy. Different results for the memo. The exact same memo averaged 3.2 for the hypothetical African-American Thomas Mayer versus 4.1 under the hypothetical Caucasian Thomas Mayer. Now, this was what was interesting. The qualitative comments on the memorandum consistently were all positive for the Caucasian Thomas Mayer than African-American Thomas Mayer. When they thought the person was Caucasian, oh, you know something? This person has a lot of raw talent. They just need a little rough. They're just a little rough around the edges. They just need a little polishing up here, a little polishing up there. When they thought the person was African American, they're like, how did this person even get into NYU? Affirmative action rears its ugly head again. Meanwhile, it was the same exact memo. So what's happening in legal environments all around the country in which it's not, a study, and really people are being more harsh towards some than others? And how does that affect the pipeline in terms of people moving up the ladder? Here we go. This is another study. According to research by Paola Secchi Demeglio, fellow at the Harvard Law School Center on the Legal Profession, work evaluations often criticize certain traits in women while praising those same traits in men. So let's read the quote. I found that these biases can lead to double standards in that a situation can get a positive or negative spin depending on gender. In one review I read, the manager noted Heidi seems to shrink when she's around others, and especially around clients. She needs to be more self-confident. But a similar problem, confidence in working with clients, was given a positive spin when a man was struggling with it. Jim needs to develop his natural ability to work with people. That said, for a man, Jim, the ability is natural and it just needs to be developed. Whereas for Heidi, a girl, it's like she just needs to be more confident, more self-confident. We're seeing this. In other peer reviews, the reviewer highlighted the women's analysis paralysis, while the same behavior in a male colleague was seen as careful thoughtfulness. This is like very similar to Thomas Mayer, based on these stereotypes. And remember, we went through some of these stereotypes. People are getting very different reviews due to stereotyping. They are getting very different reviews. Okay, so now let's move on to disability. According to the Urban Institute, disabled adults are more likely than adults without disabilities to report unfair treatment. 32% versus 10% in the healthcare setting, 18% versus 11% at work, 14% versus 3% when applying to public benefits. Moreover, among disabled adults, Black and Hispanic/Latinx adults were more likely than white adults to report unfair treatment. That's where the intersectionality that we were discussing comes in, right? Because you never just walk in, for the most part, in one box. Many of us are in many quote unquote boxes, and we're in those identities are being perceived in different ways. So adults with disabilities frequently report adverse consequences after experiencing unfair treatment. 46% of disabled adults who experience unfair treatment in workplaces reported looking for a new job as a result of unfair treatment. So this has a very real effect on attrition and retention, etc. 71% of disabled adults who reported unfair treatment in social services settings had difficulty accessing public benefits. All right, so now we're going to talk about the bystander effect, okay? The bystander effect. Very often we are in a legal environment and all of this stuff that I talked about, it's going around and we are witnessing it. And it's up to us whether we're going to be bystanders or upstanders. So let's talk about what do we mean by the bystander effect. So this was first coined in the 1960s after the infamous Kitty Genovese incident. So to refresh your memory, some of us, including myself, weren't here in the 60s, right? And we all gotta have to refresh our memories. Kitty Genovese was a young secretary and bar manager. She was robbed, stabbed, raped, and murdered in Queens, New York, while returning home from work. On March 27, 1964, the New York Times reprinted an article entitled 37 Who Saw Murder Didn't Call the Police. The article, which was later heavily criticized as not being accurate, right? But it said that dozens of neighbors witnessed the murder but did nothing to help. So many psychologists began to study such occurrences and named it the bystander effect or Genovese syndrome. So, key facets of the bystander effect. The more witnesses that there are to a crime, the less likely any individual witness will intervene, according to Bibb Latané and John Darley. 70% of people would help a woman in distress if they were the only witness. Only 40% would help if there were other witnesses. So this is counterintuitive because you feel like, oh, more people, more help. But no, there are many psychological factors. One is the diffusion of responsibility. It allows each individual to feel like it's not up to them because other people are around and will do it. Others will help. There's a human desire to conform to other people's behaviors and to gauge the severity of a situation through the reaction of others. In some instances, there may be a fear of retribution. Now, the bystander effect has taken on new dimensions in the age of social media. So people are possibly becoming less sensitive to violent crime because of the volume of violent seeds spread on social media. Capturing an event allows people to gain views and fame. Dr. Dara Greenwood explains that sharing a scene that goes viral leads to optimal distinctiveness, meaning they can be distinguished from other people because they were the ones who shared it. Recording a scene is helping because recording serves as evidence, and recording is deemed safer than physically intervening, although those who record events have in some cases faced retribution. All right, so now the bystander effect very often is occurring when people are filming instead of calling the police, instead of calling for help. So, factors that mitigate the bystander effect, meaning, okay, what can we do to encourage people to step up? Not being in a hurry. People in a hurry are less likely to help. Not being in a hurry. Not being in a hurry, right? So if someone feels as if they have time, they are more likely to take time and help. Being mindful. So mindfulness is when we're getting out of that fight, flight, amygdala, response system brain, and we're coming into presence in the situation, where we're able to think really clearly about things. Being mindful, right? So actually being someone who's in the moment, is present. A specific responsibility and commitment. So if someone has taken an oath to always help, someone's an EMT, someone's a priest, a psychologist, if someone is in some sort of group or has made some sort of declaration that they will help, they'll be more likely to help. Clarity of the emergency, right? So, we need it to be clear. Sometimes someone may think, oh, it's just a joke. Oh, it's not that serious. But when it's made very clear, help, I need help. This is an emergency situation, people are more likely to help. Being highly or uniquely skilled, right? Having the resources, the ability to help, maybe someone who knows CPR, and then individuation. Like if they say, if God forbid you're ever under attack, if you say, hey, you in the red shirt, I need your help. Like the individuation helps knock that person out of the idea that, hey, other people will do it. It's all good in the neighborhood. They can sit back and relax. So these are some of the things that mitigate the bystander effect. So for our own health and safety, or making sure that we are being upstanders and not bystanders, we want to not be in a hurry, be mindful, have specific responsibility and commitment. And then if we want to, allow ourselves to know and be clear in the emergency, and we want to be highly or uniquely skilled, we want to be individuated. All right, so opportunities for being an upstander at work. Because I know you've been thinking, let's hope no one ever witnesses a assault. And hopefully you will never. But trust me, you will witness a micro assault. So let's talk about it. You will be in rooms where you can be an upstander at work. You might be in a room where they're talking about where they are going to recruit for your law firm or your law office. You can advocate. Advocate for expanded recruitment at law schools that were not formally targeted, right? So we're not going to get into students for fair admission and all of that, right? That's the Harvard case surrounding affirmative action. But we will say this. Nothing is prohibiting law firms and law offices from casting a wide net in order to get a diverse applicant pool. Are you monitoring the mix of candidates that are being interviewed? Meaning, are you looking and are you seeing, okay, are these people from different law schools? That is a way to make sure that you cast a high net. Are you warning against fit tests? So, what's a fit test? Some of you have heard it before. When I got my first job out of undergrad working in investment banking, I was told people to do a fit test. I remember someone actually saying, Amma, when you're doing interviewing, think about whether you want to have a beer with the person. Think about whether you'd be happy being stuck at an airport with the person. But what's the problem with fit tests? Fit tests very often are tests for similarity. Is this person like me, right? The beer test may not work if your candidate is Muslim and doesn't drink beer, so will never be drinking a beer with you, right? And our goal is to have diverse offices where people of different backgrounds are able to share their different perspectives. And so we should make sure that they are aligned when it comes to values, but not that they necessarily fit in terms of interest and culture. Policy discussions. Have you advocated for disability inclusion and accessibility? So what does that mean? Does that mean it may mean having closed captioning. It may mean making sure that you have a sign language interpreter on call. It may mean making sure that there is a bathroom that's wheelchair accessible. These are all ways in which you can be an upstander. Does the bathroom policy reflect flexibility and inclusion, right? And I often say a rising tide lifts all boats, because some of these accommodations that may be geared towards one group of people often help many different people. Do your maternity leave, paternity leave, and caregiving leave policies ensure equity, right? If we want to make sure that we have an equitable workforce, we need to make sure that women are not leaving the workforce, or men are not leaving the workforce because of a lack of leave for them to take care of their children or their elderly parents or what have you. Is bereavement leave sufficient? These are all issues of equity, and when you advocate for them, you are becoming an upstander. Opportunities for being upstander again, right? So strategic planning meetings. Are you making sure that there are goals in terms of making sure that your organization is inclusive? Evaluations and exits. Are evaluation rubrics used? Very often we are able to curb this sort of bias that the Thomas Mayer memo study showed. Remember that memo I just told you that got maybe a 3.1 or 3.2 when they thought the person was black versus a 4.1 or 4.2 when they thought that the person was white. When rubrics are used, very often that clarifies people's thought processes in order to eliminate bias. Is there a clearly articulated process for challenging evaluations? Meaning, if there are situations where an evaluation seems like it's from left field, it's not justified, there should be a clearly articulated process for challenging those evaluations in order to ensure equity. Does an eclectic committee review terminations before they are final? Making sure that potentially someone who is being terminated due to bias does not get terminated. Do employees who are leaving engage in exit interviews, and are questions surrounding whether they felt included and a sense of belonging asked? And I would like to add this, and I need to add it to these slides. Are you doing stay interviews? Meaning, if you are committed to a healthy work environment, we should not be waiting till exit interviews to find out whether people have a feeling of belonging, whether they feel as if their gifts are being honored, whether they feel as if they're getting the mentorship opportunities. The exit interview is too late. So Please advocate for stay interviews, check-ins every so often with people within your organization to make sure that their careers are progressing in a good fashion. All right, then more opportunities, reviewing cases, right? Or underserved communities being served, or pro bono legal services being promoted. We are lawyers. We're doing a CLE. There is a demand. There is an expectation that lawyers engage in pro bono activity. Are potential clients aware of your organization's cultural responsiveness? And then when it comes to the everyday indignities or microaggressions, these are some important questions to ask. Has a policy surrounding how microaggressions are reported been clearly articulated? Meaning, if someone experiences, the sort of backhanded compliment, oh, you speak English so well, and the person is shocked that they're being treated this way, what is the process within your organization for reporting and addressing it? That's a good question. Important. Has everyone in the firm received training on microaggressions? Is this even a thought there? Has the training been reinforced through repetition? Because we all have to be reminded. I do this work day in and day out. I still need as many as reminders as possible because we've all been culturally programmed from the media, from our past experiences, etc. So we need reminders in coming into this new era. Okay, great. So now, when microaggressions occur, how do we handle them? So this is my advice. 1, reflect on the microaggression as you explore and validate your own feelings. 2, determine whether you would like to follow up with the person or issue at this time. In determining your response, think about your own mental health, time, concerns, and energy. And then, now this is very important in a legal environment where there are issues of decorum, respect, and hierarchy. Very often when someone is saying something or making a comment and you can't, it's not seen as correct to really just call the person in a rude or direct way. My workaround is asking a question. What did you mean by that? Oh, you hear, like, for example, a woman of African descent usually has her hair in a fluffy afro. Then she straightens it. And people all of a sudden are saying, you look so much more professional. The response, really? What do you mean by that? Oh, do you think how I looked before wasn't professional? Very often when those questions are asked, the person then has an opportunity to recognize what he or she said and how it was wrong. Then the person often corrects themselves and realizes it, right? And then again, share. If you choose to follow up with the person, share how this statement impacted you, have the courage to be honest and vulnerable. Again, we already determined that we already said we have to determine whether you have the bandwidth for it today. If you have the bandwidth, you share. Have an honest and vulnerable discussion in creating a teachable moment, okay? And then report if applicable. So in the hair example, right? Someone, I straighten my hair or I put on a straight wig and all of a sudden someone says, oh my goodness, Alma, today you finally are looking more professional. What do? I determine, do I have the bandwidth to have this discussion today? Right? We have to take care of ourselves, right? If I do, inquire, really? What do you mean by that? Was my prior hairstyle unprofessional in your view, right? And then potentially share, hey, people of African descent typically have kinky, curly hair patterns. Our hair does not grow straight like many people of European descent. I'm saying many because there are people in Europe who have afros as well, who are, European with afros. I've met Russian people with afros. So I'm just speaking in general terms. Hey, I straighten my hair today, but I do that very infrequently because the harsh chemicals and heat have a very horrible, horrible, horrible impact on hair. I like my hair kinky. It is the way I was made. And, I believe that it is just as professional as any other sort of hair texture. I'm just giving you an example, right? And then, of course, is report when applicable. Okay, next up, upstander during a microaggression. So you're with me in the room when this happens, right? My hair is straight for the day, or I put on a straight wig. All of a sudden, people are saying I look more professional. Now you are the upstander there, and you reflect. Oh goodness, this is a little bit, tense. What's going on? You also determine yourself whether you would like to intervene. You can inquire and interrupt and say, what do you mean by I'm looking more professional today? I mean, I think she looks professional both ways, right? You can interrupt. And very often when the person who's experiencing it is too shell-shocked to speak, you being an upstander can say something. What do you mean by that? Or actually, I disagree. I think both are just as professional. You then interrupt and ask a question. You're not saying, oh, you terrible racist. How dare you make that? No, you just inquiring. This is what I suggest in a law firm environment. Inquire. And then if you are the upstander, you can discuss it with the target. Hey, I think that comment was rude, Amma. How do you feel? How are you taking it? And then report if applicable and if you have permission, right? So that's an upstander during the microaggression. And now, oh my goodness, this is so important. When you commit a microaggression, people, we've all done it. It's called being human. We've all done it. So when you are on the perpetrating end, right? Listen to the recipient and validate the recipient, right? So, Amma, I hear you. I understand. It was an insensitive comment. I apologize. And then reflect on all of the conditioning that caused you to make that statement. Okay, so we've done this role play already. All right, natural Nina. This is the role play. We've already kind of discussed this already. This is the here before. This is it after and straightened. You're the upstander. You say her hair is professional either way, right? Her hair is beautiful and professional either way. You're Nina. You say, what did you mean by that, right? When you get that comment, we can make a difference. This is another scenario. Marta maternity. So let's go through it. Thomas and Marta are working on a presentation together. Thomas excitedly suggests that Marta and he present their work together at a conference in December with senior leaders. Marta knows she will be on maternity leave in December, maternity leave or parental leave. Marta tells Thomas that she will not be available because of her parental leave. And Thomas says, because I am actually serious about my career and my work, I will be there and I'll just present without you. Ooh. What do you do? Right? So you're Marta and you may say, what do you mean by because you're actually serious about your career? Right? And Thomas is going to say, uh-oh. Right? Thomas will know that he's insinuating because Marta is having a baby, she's not serious about her career. Thomas may apologize right then, or Thomas may not. Marta may take it up with HR. Someone in the room may speak up and say, Thomas, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by because you're actually serious about your career? I've known Marta for a decade now, and she's one of the most serious attorneys that I know, right? You can intervene and say something. Then speak to Marta afterwards and say, oh my goodness, I'm sorry that happened to you. Discuss, validate. This one's important. This is dealing with neurodivergence. Headphones are so disrespectful. So Patrick, a partner at the law firm, walks into the conference room in a cheerful mood. However, as soon as he lays eyes on Anderson, he becomes irate. Patrick screams, what on earth? We are in a professional setting, and here Andrew is with headphones on. These Gen Zers have no respect, and they want to listen to music during a work meeting. Now, Mario knows that Anderson has autism and uses sensory headphones to cancel out the background noise so he can focus better. What should Mario say? This very, very relevant. Very, very, very relevant. Very relevant. What should so you go ahead and think about the response in your mind. I'm suggesting, and of course, there are many ways to skin a cat, that Mario says something along the lines of, "Oh, but how do you know those headphones are for music and they're not sensory headphones?" Or whatever comment that may be. "Oh, but why do you think that he's listening to music rather than just using the headphones to block out the sounds in a stimulating, sensorily stimulating environment?" Mario can be an upstander in that situation. Mario can be an upstander in that situation. So now, once that's said, very often Patrick will apologize. Patrick will say, "Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry. I thought that those headphones were for music. I apologize. I apologize." Right? So Mario can be the upstander in that situation. And of course, if you're Anderson, Anderson may be shocked, may need time to validate himself, but Anderson can also, of course, say, "Oh, but I'm sorry. Why do you think these are for listening to music? These are actually sensory headphones." All right, so let's talk about developing an upstander culture. We're coming towards the end. If you have any questions, I'm looking forward to hearing your questions. Whew. Ensure that all reports of bias are investigated and the HR or the DEI team follows up with the person who reported the bias until the issue is resolved. Why do I say this, right? So I, do corporate consulting. I go and do these culture interviews, these environment, ambient interviews for companies. And we do town halls very often to say, "Hey, please fill out this climate survey." And then we'll do a town hall 6 months later, and announce what has been done. Right? We'll do a town hall in between to explain the results. But the most important issue that comes up is, has management listened? People are not going to be upfront about what they're thinking or what they're feeling if they feel as if time and time again they filled out climate surveys, they've gone to HR, they've shared this, they've shared that, and nothing has been done. So we have to make sure that all reports of bias are investigated, and the HR, DI team, if they have one, maybe it's a culture team, maybe it's the people team, whatever you call it, your organization, follows up. What was the final result? Did it lead to a conversation? Was a policy or practice revised as a result? Incorporate cultural competence into performance reviews. Make sure that colleagues, more senior individuals and junior individuals feel respected. Make sure that that is actually a part of the evaluation, that people are being evaluated on whether they're able to foster those experiences of belonging and inclusion. Have there been any reports of microaggressions and or other forms of disrespect from the individual? We want to make sure that individuals are being respected and that that's actually a part of their evaluation. Are they respectful? Okay. What else are we doing? We're creating opportunities for non-hierarchical communication. My staffing company, we send people to do these restorative sharing circles. It's team building activities where everyone is speaking in a circle. A talking piece is being passed, and they are actually speaking with one another, not at one another, with no respect to hierarchy. Are junior attorneys invited to lead discussions? Do non-attorney staff lead events? Is cultural understanding promoted through training sessions, commemorative celebrations, town halls, book clubs? We need to encourage a social and cultural exchange, and we really need to encourage emotional learning and maturity. Okay. And a rising tide lifts all boats. Very often there are concerns about reverse discrimination, the idea that qualified people are not being promoted. And of course, having inclusion does not mean having people who are not qualified. We want a mix of employees to better serve a mix of clients, and we want a wide net so that we really get the best out of the best. And McKinsey has data to show that. So let's conclude. Bias is pervasive. It's present in recruiting, retention, and evaluations. It also rears its ugly head through microaggressions. Bystanders often do nothing because of diffusion of responsibility, lack of social cues, and fear of retaliation or ostracism. However, individuals can be upstanding by committing to inclusion, being mindful, cultivating empathy. Upstanders can intervene by asking questions, interrupting conversations, validating the experiences of victims, and upstanders should remain respectful to the victim or target's agencies. Upstanders can leverage tools of conflict communication to better intervene. Thank you so much. Are there any questions? Let me look in the chat.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Amma, for all of your insights. There are a few questions that we have here, so we can go ahead and move on to those questions. As Amma said, you can go ahead and submit those by clicking the Q&A button in the control panel at the bottom of your screen and sending those in. So our first question comes from an anonymous attendee. They ask, how do we measure success in bystander intervention within a law firm? What metrics, whether it's qualitative or quantitative, can you reliably tell us will show how that's doing in a law firm?
So thank you so much. I am not confident that we will have reliable data if people are not reporting. So how do we generally measure it? So as I mentioned, HR teams, the chief of culture, the chief people officer, sometimes however your organization is organized, should have a protocol for microaggressions. And very often these may be brought up by the people who are the target, or they may be brought up by bystanders. So if they are keeping track and saying, this month we got this information, the next month we got that, these are the incidents, that's certainly data that can be tracked. However, the data is only as good as the data. If it's happening in a widespread way and people are not giving the information to HR, whatever organization or team, then we just wouldn't know, unfortunately. But great question. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma. All right, our next question is, how do you feel Upstander training can be integrated into existing performance evaluation systems without turning it into a check the box exercise?
Well, that is a really good question. So we discussed this in terms of evaluations, general like 360 evaluations or what have you, and making sure that we're integrating that. So for example, you may have junior people, because we believe in seniors and juniors both doing evaluations. So in some cases, you may have juniors and there may be questions for them. Do you feel as if your supervisor, speaks up for you in situations in which you are not being treated with respect? Or do you believe your colleague speaks up for you in situations where you're not being treated with respect? So we certainly can put all of those questions in order to create that. And as I mentioned before, another great tool are the stay interviews. So there are consultants in my organization that go and help organizations craft stay interviews and have them disseminate and create the culture stay interviews, because you also want to make sure that you are checking in with people regularly to make sure that they are feeling respected and that they feel as if they are in an environment in which if they're ever disrespected, they are not out there on their own. Other people will witness it and speak up for them. So again, stay interviews as well as the evaluations. And we believe in evaluations being widespread and going both ways and not just in a hierarchical way.
Thank you. Our next question is, how should a firm specifically address implicit bias and explicit bias in disciplinary, hiring, or promotional decisions?
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. Again, we keep on discussing all of these different evaluations. So the evaluations that are going to be going both up and down are certainly going to be used with respect to promotions. But additionally, when it comes to just the general structure of the organization, audits. There are professionals, right? Within my organization, I staff out professionals who go and actually audit the system. Okay, let's look, not a check the boxes, but let's, one, look at the general environment, look at how the bathrooms are operating, look at how how do the policies stack up to other organizations, looking at whether there's parental leave, looking at all of these different facets of equity and being able to actually evaluate an organization and say this organization is more equitable than others. But then, of course, as you said, not just, checking the box, oh yeah, they have a family bathroom, oh yeah, they do this, but also speaking to the individual. So certainly, again, there are organizations, Miles Tails says, people go out and do this at organizations who actually sit down and speak to individuals in a sort of round robin circles type fashion and get information from them about how they are feeling and what they need to feel more of a sense of belonging and a feeling of respect. And so we want both the institutional changes and that work in terms of making sure that the institution is up to par when it comes to creating an equitable environment. But we're also seeking information from individuals to make sure that on the ground that feeling is there.
Thank you. Our next question comes from Letty. They ask, is there a book or further training that we could use in our workplace within this specific context? Do you have any recommendations?
Okay, well, as I mentioned, I love book clubs. Very often, of course, you can certainly make sure that you can bring in trainers. I have an organization, other people have organizations where trainers can certainly come in and do that. But this is constant work. We're never reaching the nirvana of inclusion because as we keep on moving, more issues start coming up. So, for example, many of you have seen the change. Like when I started this work, let's say in 2015, pronouns were not as big of an issue. But then pronouns had a moment where everyone was talking about it, where we were learning about it. Then later on, it started shifting. And now it's more about disability and accessibility. There's going to be another wave of information, another wave of sort of awakening with respect to how stereotypes and microaggressions are happening. So we never reach there. We're consistently reading. We're consistently thinking. We're soliciting even book ideas from the community, understanding other people's experiences. And of course, as much as I love books and as much as I love training, I have a publishing and training company. So I love publishing books and training. We also need to make sure that most of all, we're cultivating an atmosphere of discussion and sharing among the people within the organization. And so that's why I mentioned state interviews. That's why I mentioned town halls. That's why I mentioned that you should be having commemorative celebrations and whatnot. You want to create a culture in which there's constant dialogue.
Thank you, Amma. And then I think this is our last question for today. This anonymous attendee asks, how does a remote or hybrid work complicate the detection of microaggressions and discriminatory behaviors? What tools can firms adopt to address this discrepancy?
This is a really, really, really good question. This is a fantastic question. So there's a phrase, democracy dies in the dark. I often also use the phrase equity dies in the dark. And I actually have an anecdote about this. It's a terrible, terrible situation. So I know someone, these people are actually related to me, in which there was a downsizing at an organization. And this young man gets downsized and gets a severance package. A year later, his girlfriend gets summoned, gets a subpoena because the assistant of the HR director is suing for discrimination and, to use a colloquialism, has spilled the tea that the Black and brown people got lower severance packages than the white people. Now, this man who got the lowest severance package would never have known. It's just a coincidence that his girlfriend was a part of the organization and was a part of the lawsuit. And so that said, very often this information about severance packages, about pay, all of it is very, very secretive. And it was secretive even when we were in the office. Now that it's remote and hybrid, it's even more secretive. So what is our armor against this? Transparency. Putting out documentation with what the salary levels are at every position. Engaging in training and onboarding about what the culture of the organization is so people are not engaging in sort of cultural faux pas. The armor against that is institutional transparency. Again, institutional transparency, making sure that all the things that were in the dark and that were obscured are now actually being brought to light. It's all open so that people know what type of money they're supposed to get. They know what their rights are. They know whether, I mean, I've seen in some organizations that some people are allowed to be remote, others are not being allowed to be to remote. No one knows exactly what the calculus is and why that person's at home every day and that other person has to be in the office. Make it clear. Make it clear, everyone. So I hope that helps.
Yes, certainly. And thank you so much for responding to all of our audience questions and all of your wonderful insights today. It's been such a pleasure to have you. And thank you to all of our audience members for submitting your questions. We always really appreciate your participation. We want to thank you all so much for joining us for another Justia webinar. I do want to remind you all, as I did at the top of our presentation, of the services available to you through our website platform, Justia Elevate. It's our innovative, feature-packed website solution that's designed specifically for law firms. It has a lot of AI tools like our Justia AI Writer to help you craft content, the AI-powered Justia Chat to help you get more leads, and our new AI optimization tool to help you boost your chances of being featured in AI results. If you'd like to learn more about pricing and what might be a good fit for your firm, you can go to elevate.justia.com/price or call us at 888-587-8421. Thank you all so much for joining and have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you. Thanks for watching. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did enjoy it, please click the like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos on law practice and legal marketing. See you in our next video.